And where I want to kick this off is with an appreciation for the Eagles head coach. That sort of thing seems to be in short supply in this city. And I think we need to take a look at Nick Sirianni, the job that he's done, not only over the course of this year, but over the course of the last 4 years in Philly. And it's interesting. I don't think there are very many coaches that would have been in the hot seat coming into a year the way that Nick Sirianni was coming into the year this year. He inherited a 4-win team. Now he's more talented than that, but he inherited a team that had won 4 games in the COVID year of 2020. He made the playoffs in his first year, finished that season real hot. They won a playoff game. Then in year 2, he takes the Eagles all the way to the Super Bowl. They were the best team in the NFC all year long, on the doorstep of a world championship. And then in 2023, they make the playoffs again. Now, they collapsed down the stretch, which is one of the reasons why his job security was in question. But, really, you look at the totality of it. There are very few places other than this one where a coach would make the playoffs in his first 3 years. A first-time head coach would make the playoffs in his first 3 years after having inherited a 4-win team, would have a Super Bowl on his resume, and would come into the season with arguably the hottest seat in the entire league. That talk is gone now. The Eagles are now 8-2. After starting 2-2, they've won 6 in a row. And I think a lot of it is due to how Sirianni has handled his team. And after 4 games, he really asked that his players and his coaches reflect on where they were at 2-2, all the things that had gone wrong. There was a lot of change in the organization. They not only had new coordinators on both sides of the ball, they had new coordinators coming from outside the organization. It was the second straight year they had 2 new coordinators. But the year before, one of the 2 coordinators had come from the inside. In this case, you had 2 guys with a lot of experience coming in Kellen Moore on offense and Vic Fangio on defense. So you had to meld what those guys did, what those guys believe, with what you already had established. So that was, an open question. And then there was a leadership void that had to be filled with Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox retiring. Both those guys were Eagles for over a decade, a huge part of 2 Super Bowl teams and a huge part of everything that had been built over the previous decade plus here in Philadelphia. So a ton of transition. They go through that 2-2 start. They get to the bye. And Nick Sirianni really wanted his players, his coaches to reflect on everything. And I think that did a lot of people a lot of good, and nobody more so than Jalen Hurts and Kellen Moore, who went back and reviewed over 2 years of Hurts's tape, tried to figure out, okay, what's the best way out of this? What's the best way forward where we can meld Kellen Moore's system with what Hurts does well? What they figured out was our strength right now is Saquon Barkley and the run game. Let's lean into that. Let's lean into play action off of that. And the results have really followed. The first 4 games, in each of the first 4 games, Jalen Hurts had a passer rating in the 80s. In the 6 games since, 5 of those 6, at least, he had a 115 or better passer rating. I hadn't seen the passer rating for last night, but he was good enough last night, plenty good enough last night after a little bit of a slow start. And I think you put Barkley squarely in the MVP conversation now, too. He had 198 scrimmage yards on 28 touches. He has been a major factor all the way through for the Eagles. And the Eagles deserve credit for sort of zigging when everybody else was zagging. I think there were a lot of people who, know the Eagles organization who doubted that they would pay a veteran running back. But what the Eagles looked at was the impact that Saquon Barkley could have on the team, the feeling Saquon Barkley gave them playing against him when he was on the Giants, and then also where the market is. And, somebody there told me this week, what we paid for Saquon Barkley was roughly the equivalent of what Atlanta paid for Darnell Mooney on the free agent market. Now, Darnell Mooney's done a really good job. I'm not denigrating him at all, but you're talking about a guy who's coming in as a complementary piece to what the Falcons are doing versus a guy who's going to touch the ball 300 times in Saquon Barkley. And Barkley's proven to be even more valuable than they had thought because they had the receiver injuries earlier in the year with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith battling through stuff. It really allowed them to build an offense around Saquon Barkley, build a passing game around Saquon Barkley, and that so much of what they're doing is off of play action now. And I don't even think they played their best last night, but You see the offense coming along. The defense is playing great under Vic Fangio. I think the two rookie defensive backs, Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, have made a huge difference for them. This is an Eagles team that's in really good shape going into the stretch drive at 8-2 and in full command of the NFC East. Doesn't take nothing away from the Commanders. I thought their play style showed up early in that game. The talent gap showed up later in the game, where you saw the Eagles sort of impose their will on the Commanders. And now the Eagles, go into late November as the clear favorite to win the NFC East.